The world has moved from knowledge worker age to a learning worker age. Let me explain what learning worker age is. In earlier times, not very long ago, knowledge was very, very important. It was the fundamental asset around which individuals found meaningful employment and engagement, and that helped them monetize their skills. Today, with the advent of technology, knowledge has become freely available and abundantly available. So, therefore, having knowledge is of no real consequence. What is important is individuals and organizations' ability to quickly learn something, unlearn things that they have to learn to stay relevant, reach the peak of dexterity in terms of the new skill that is acquired, and then move on to the next one. And that defines the learning worker. In the recent times, we have seen this whole aspect of learning has taken the center stage, specifically during the crisis and the lockdown and so on and so forth. Organizations have done huge investments in terms of creating learning ecosystems. Earlier on, I talked about the Internet of Learning and how there are six components of that coming together. Yet the reality remains that the return on investment in learning initiative is still amongst the lowest as compared to any other corporate initiative. So talking today with me is a very dear and a very old friend, Nishchae Suri, who actually needs no introduction in this part of the world. But most recently, he is the president of Edcast for EMEA and MEA. And, I was just joking to him that except for North America, you are, kind of ruling the entire world. So Nishchae, welcome.
Thank you, Shaakun,
for taking this time out. And I think this is a very, very interesting conversation you and I are having after a couple of years. Mostly whenever we have had these conversations, Nishchae, you and I have been drunk. We have been drinks and enjoying ourselves. While we miss that, but I think the thing will remain the same. So tell me, Nishchae, why is it that learning, why it is so important and critical, has suddenly become the center stage player in the global scheme of things?
Well, Shaakun, to begin with, I guess we are all experiencing an enormity of disruption, right? And if I can use the cliche, change is a constant. Clearly, every day is a new day. And that is placing a demand on each individual. A demand on each individual to be a better version of themselves, but also a different version of themselves, which means the businesses are being disrupted, in many ways are being transformed, where the rules are being rewritten. Now, that of course necessarily means that you need different capabilities to survive and sustain. Now, if I were to say that learning is a process of creating, acquiring, aggregating, applying new capabilities within an organization, then clearly being an agile learner, which essentially means when you find yourself in a new situation where you don't know what to do, how quickly are you able to solve for that? Right? So therefore, learning agility, in my mind, is a critical competency, a critical skill that every individual and every organization needs.
Yeah, very, very true. And I like that how it is about acquiring and aggregating. I think organizations have grossly underrated and failed in aggregation of skill sets. In spite of the fact that we have technology, we have platforms, the fact is even today, majority of the organizations do not have a very real sense of real-time competencies and skills that exist in their people and in their organization.
Yeah, actually, it's the pursuit of excellence, right? The point of bliss, as I would describe it, which essentially means just in time, just enough, and just for me. Now, it's a utopian state, but nonetheless, if you don't shoot for the stars, then you get left with a handful of dust. And in my mind, clearly, being agile, being hungry, because agility comes with two aspects. One is the willingness, which is primal curiosity, right? Being curious as a newborn. The other is the ability. And when I talk about ability, it's not necessarily only about acquiring, but equally so about applying. because when you apply new learned knowledge in a new environment, right, with the objective of either transforming behavior or creating a shift in performance or both. And that's what's really needed. And you did a very interesting study which I read, so I'd probably like to ask you this question: is the rise of Generation R, what does that mean for organization and learning strategies?
So it's interesting because this generation R is that generation which has reset themselves. These are the people who have emerged as the resilient learners. Interestingly, in the research, we found out that people who are who belong to this generation R category, 54% of them have learned multiple things during the lockdown period, and they have learned this without any reason, for the fun of it. It was probably the first time, like when people like you and me found ourselves with a lot of disposable discretionary time, right? My calendar is still as blocked as it was, but I don't have to commute. I'm not on long flights. I'm not waiting and commuting for customer meetings and so on and so forth. So what do? Most of the generation R people have started looking at learning. Now, the initial phase of learning was that little aspiration that I thought I will do one day. People did that. Then they kind of got hooked on to this charm of learning, and then they started learning. And the third realization was that now that I have learned something, can I do things around it? Can I actually monetize it? Now, one of the other things that we are seeing in Generation R is they want to try out new roles that they have never done before. And remember, it is not just about the millennials or the Gen X, Gen Y, it is across all those people who have reset themselves.
Which essentially, again, reinforces the point of curiosity. So they've cultivated everyday learner habits to learn something new. And when they're learning something new, now they're finding avenues in which they can apply that new learning with clearly, I guess, an objective, right? And the objective of learning translates into a couple of things. One, can I get employment? I mean, fundamentally, people work to live, to sustain themselves. Now, if we were to cross that, clearly they want to progress. They want to improve their performance. They want better financial returns. So it's all coming together in my mind that you're creating this army, this new generation of learners that is making the world a better place ultimately.
So tell me, individuals are realizing, professionals like you and I are realizing, the world at large is also realizing this is important. However, when I look at the latest Edcast study, I saw that only 1% organizations are really thriving when it comes to their learning health. Now, this is dichotomous. Tell me, what is amiss? What is the problem out there?
Common sense is uncommon, right? So, well, it's a tall ask. So, when you talk about a thriving learning ecosystem, again, it is a utopian state. And I like to kind of mirror that with learning at the pace of business. Now we understand that the pace of business is rapidly accelerated in terms of the requirements that are or the core competencies or knowledge and skills that are needed to perform, because the rules of the game are being rewritten every day. Now, what that has done is it's actually created a bigger divide, and the distance between learning and working has in fact increased. The question is, how do we bring that together? Now, from the Learning Health Index study that we ran, of course, overall for corporate India, we are operating at 2/3 of our potential. So there is largely an underutilization of our capabilities. And there are several reasons for that, right? Ultimately, an ecosystem is made up of several components. And to be in that utopian state, these components must come together harmoniously and work perfectly with one another, which is always a big challenge, because the circumstances surrounding each component, right? Whether it is to do with aligning your learning strategy with business, or it is to do with tools and technologies that are needed.
Yeah. And talking about tools of technology, Nishchae, I think the choice of technology is grossly underrated, and increasing number of organizations get it wrong, right? They end up buying the wrong tools in technology. Uh, what is your advice? How should we look at a comprehensive learning strategy where technology is just one component of it, but the most critical one?
We've been, I think, colored with our poor experiences of the past. Many people have burnt their not knowing what to do with it. But the fault doesn't lie with the technology. It actually lies with the user. Not knowing how to use that technology and what problems you're trying to address. Now, in my mind, choice also creates complexity because you have to now put together the right tech stack. And in my view, the right tech stack must be premised on the employee. So clearly, the experience of using technology of enablement is a very, very important consideration. That you're not only looking at one stakeholder, but you're looking at all the stakeholders and then determining the tech stack, keeping those considerations in simplicity. So that's one. So keep it simple to begin with. And two, conversational, which means the tech stack, whether you embed it or deploy within the organization, ultimately they need to be intuitive, they need to be AI powered to the extent possible, they need to have strong analytics, they need to be conversational, they need to be scalable, and they need to be affordable in the environment that we operate in.
So on a lighter note, Nishte, the last few sentences, it seemed you're talking about Oracle technology
Or Edcast, either which way.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, interestingly, it's not about the stack anymore, because stacking sometimes could mean there are multiple hands-offs and integration. And I like the word that you use. It's about embedding systems, and that's where the world is moving. I clearly see four trends that are emerging in the world of learning. First of all, this whole technology thing, how it is based on intuitiveness, intelligence, and user ease of use. That's one thing. I also like the term that you use, that it is just in time and just the right amount of learning. Right? Gone are those days when people would read books for the pleasure of reading. I mean, that's the reality. That's the second thing. And lastly, I think it is about contextual learning. Can I learn something which has got nothing to do with my field of work, but it comes to me at the time when I require it? I do my gig and then move on. So those are the three important trends and patterns that I'm seeing. What are you seeing? What are some of the emerging trends in the internet of learning, as I say?
See, there is an overload of information, right? And I'm just going to use the millennials. I don't know whether the same traits exist with Gen R, but they're impatient, number one. They're overwhelmed. Multiple business applications using multiple mediums to work and to learn. And in this environment, you have to obviously work through the complexity and make things clear and simple. Really make it about the employee, and enable the employee and provide all the support needed in this environment. In my mind, a couple of things stand out. One, how do you make content contextual? Which is, content is king, but context is the kingdom. Ultimately, it is about contextual content. It is about me as an individual, which is where the personalization and the understanding of the learner, his or her goals, preferences, styles, fears, concerns, are very, very important to recognize as we work through this period of turbulence, right? The second is, let the machines do a lot of your heavy lifting. Clearly, I guess leveraging machines and leveraging technology uh, to share the burden of responsibility is a very, very important dimension in my view, because the load is overwhelming, right? It clearly, as I mentioned, that the divide or the distance between working and learning is kind of increased and accentuated, and COVID has even made it worse from what it existed earlier. Another very important consideration is I guess, the ability to stitch a portfolio of content together. So we've been traditionalists in shopping for and buying for content, right?
Mhm.
And clearly, I think there are better ways of stitching a portfolio wherein you can maximize your return on the portfolio, just like an investment manager. So, are you tapping into all the tacit knowledge within an organization which exists with the subject matter experts, right? Are you tapping into the open source world of content and knowledge, which is freely available? But are you being able to tap it, aggregate it, contextualize it, codify it, make it available? Um, are you actually spending money on premium content which is contextual, is relevant, and creates, I guess, the interest, evokes the interest of the learner, who then learns and then applies? And then are you providing a conducive overall environment for the learner? I think the question that comes to my mind is, can you have a healthy learner in a toxic learning environment?
Wonderfully, very well said. Very well said. I think two things I'm grateful that we heard from you. One, learning is not shopping. Learning is creating an investment portfolio. So you got to be very, very mindful and careful about it. And second, this thing that a healthy learning can never take place in a toxic environment, right? Good. Time flew away once again, Nishchai. I wish we had more time, but I
Right?
think
So
the points that you share are very pertinent.
we
Uh,
can keep having this discussion.
that's the intention, because this whole future of work series that we are doing, the idea is to generally have a conversation. Like I was telling you, in the earlier times, we used to bump into each other, meet each other, have these banters, and learn something. Now that is missing, so I'm just trying to recreate that.
Great. Thanks for reaching out, Shakun.
Yep. Thank you so much, Nishchai. Have a good day. Stay safe, and we'll talk again soon.
Keep learning.
Keep
Talk.
learning. Bye bye. Thank you.